concurs with the agency's request for FY 2023. I'll stand for questions on 23.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for fiscal year 2023? Yes, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Martin, notice in the capital or the contractual services, they're down $2,400, and I know that that's not an amount of money that is not very much. Down 2,422, and the estimate is that it's going to be up, $23. Is that just a line that's going to go up and down as needed or as estimated, and we shouldn't look at that?
No, I understand. And, you know, we, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of things that go into these, and when we try to provide you with the best and accurate information. So from contractual expenditures, one expenditure might go up while the other one goes down and goes back and forth. So it does flow a little bit. You could ask the agency if he knows what's going on.
I'm going to blame it on paper clips. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Martin, do you need to sum everything up?
Well, I would like to mention that on page 17, you'll have a overview of their fee fund analysis. And on the following page, starting on page 18, you'll have a breakdown of all of their agency fees, their current status of what the fee is, and the statutory limit if there's a limit for those fees. The last couple pages of this analysis gives you a breakdown of their two programs. So that gives you a little bit more in-depth analysis on how money is spent within their two programs within the agency. And with that, I conclude the overview.
Martin, if they were to increase their fees, do they need to get permission to do that as long as they're under the statutory limit? Are they able to increase their fees, or is that something that takes legislative authority?
I apologize. I'll have to defer to Shirley on this one.
Shirley knows it all.
They would have to introduce a bill to increase fees above the statutory limit, but not if they're within the statutory limit.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone on the committee have any other questions that have to do with either the two different programs or the funding sources or anything else that you'd like to ask Martin? Anyone? Okay, Martin, I think we're good with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now I'd like to welcome David Fry, who is here in person. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, can you all hear me okay?
I will tell you that microphone, you are going to have to be pretty close for the people on WebEx to be able to hear you. So if you don't mind. And if you would, I don't know how you are with your superiors, but if you would like to take your mask off, Shirley is a little close, but I don't know how you feel. Let's see how you do and then go from there if there's an issue. Okay.
Sounds great. And I'll try to talk close and try to be a little loud so it can be heard. My name is Dave Fye, and I am the new Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board, or as you said, the BSRB. I am pretty new to my position. The previous Executive Director, Max Foster, has served the agency for about 8 years, and he just retired. His last day with the agency was January 8th. So I am getting up to speed on a lot of the topics for the agency, but we want to wish Max well in his retirement. The BSRB, as Martin went ahead and explained, is a licensing agency, and the mission of the board is to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare from unlawful professional practitioners who fall under the board's jurisdiction. And I provided some testimony to you. I understand it was sent electronically. I also provided a few copies in paper. So if you have the same copy, I just want to let you know it's the same thing that you received electronically. There are 7 unique professions that are licensed and regulated by the agency. And those have to do with licensed psychologist, master's level psychologist, social workers, professional counselors, marriage and family therapist, addiction counselors, and also behavior analyst. And within those 7, there are different classifications based on level of education and some other requirements. I provided a breakdown of the current number of licensees currently at the end of January of 2021. Just to give you a little information about our agency, we are a somewhat small agency. It is 9 employees, including myself, and the majority of the office works on the licensing side in terms of the responsibilities. We do have 1 employee who is the primary investigator who works in the discipline and complaints and investigations, and we have 1 other employee who does about half and half time, and they're about 0.6 towards the licensure and about 0.4 in terms of their full-time equivalent position, so that's split between licensure and discipline. In terms of our funding sources, we are a fee-funded agency, so we receive no money from the state general fund in terms of our expenditures. We also do not receive federal funds usually, although I did want to note in my testimony, we received $860 last year, and that was to purchase some masks, so it was for some PPE in terms of our employees. As Martin described, we do have a revised estimate for expenditures in FY 2021. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, as Martin mentioned, the last 8 years I did work for the legislature in the Legislative Research Department. And Martin talked about our FY 2021 expenditures. I just want to let the committee know those expenditures originally for FY 2021 were approved by the 2019 legislature. And then last year, we were able to make adjustments to FY 2021 expenditures. And then this year, we have submitted a revised estimate. And so when Martin talked about it's the same as the approved, it matches the amount the legislature approved last year for FY 2021. Our FY 2022 request is pretty similar. We just have some different adjustments based on where we have categorized expenditures for that year. In FY 2023, it's about $9,000 higher. And the primary reason is there are some fringe benefit costs for salaries for state employees, and one of those costs is we try to estimate the amount of employer contributions for state employee health insurance, and we estimate that that is going to go up in 2023, so about half of the increase is for that. The rest of the increase is primarily due to, we have some office equipment, primarily computers and some of the boardroom furniture and some other equipment in the office. In my short time with the agency, I can tell the agency in the past has really been conservative in terms of trying to prolong the life of existing equipment. But unfortunately, I can tell we have some different items that really do need to be replaced. So some of the amount of the funding there in FY 2023 does have to go towards increasing our capital outlay, or that's more permanent equipment. And so it would be replacing some of that items for 2023. And as Martin mentioned, our initial request was submitted back in September of 2020. So these items didn't include anything past that point. This was our initial submission for the governor's office and the legislature. And the governor did concur with the amount that we requested for each of the 3 fiscal years. And I did provide a little bit of additional information to answer some of the questions by the committee if you'd like me to go ahead and address some of those questions that came up, or I could pause and go for any questions.
Why don't you go ahead? That'd be great. Thanks.
So just to touch on a couple of the questions that were asked, in terms of our funding sources, as Martin mentioned, we are a fee-funded agency. So in terms of when Martin refers to special revenue funds, almost all of our expenditures year to year are from the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board fee fund. And that fund receives funding revenue from primarily licensure of the different professions that we regulate. Now, with all fee-funded agencies in statute, there is a contribution that fee-funded agencies make towards the state general fund. And so by statute, we contribute 10% of what we receive in revenue up to a cap of $100,000 each year. So when you see the revenue numbers in Martin's write-up, that is after that 10%, or in our case, it's a little bit less, it's usually around $80,000, has been contributed to the state general fund. In terms of a sweep or a limit, so there's not specifically language under our agency in terms of sweeps or moving the money from the fee fund. However, I understand that this has been sort of a rare occurrence. I think the last time it happened for our agency was back in about 2016. And since that time, the agency did look towards our fee fund balance to see if we are being fair to the licensees and how much they are charging. And the board did decide to go ahead and lower funds in terms of what was being charged, the fees. And so in 2019, each of the different licensure fees and the original license fees were lowered by $50 each. So we have tried to take steps in the last few years to lower the fees to make sure we didn't have too large of a balance and that we were being appropriate with the money that we are collecting in terms of revenue. There was a question concerning the $10,000 difference. And based on my review, I believe that's primarily between the 2022 and the 2023. And as I mentioned, that has to do primarily with replacing some of that office equipment, but also the projected increase in the fringe benefits for the employer contributions, health insurance. In terms of contractual services, so contractual services are just a way to categorize expenditures for our agency. Our primary expenditure is salary based on the staff that we do employ to help with licensure and investigations and discipline. Contractual services is sort of a broad category, and a lot of things can fit under contractual services. For us, some of our primary contractual services do have to do with expenditures that we provide to the Office of Information Technology Services. Over the past few years, the agency did have its own server and was operating a little more independently, but we had some issues with some of the technology we were using. And so one of the reasons why our costs have gone up over the last few years, we moved underneath the Office of Information Technology Services, or OITS. And so that was one of our contractual services that has increased recently. Additionally, in terms of the other contractual services, one of the other major ones is legal services. So in the past, that 10% that we contribute to the State General Fund, it had provided certain services, and one of them was we did receive assistance from the Office of the Attorney General. However, over the last few years, they have made a move to start charging for those services independent of that 10%. And so we do have a contract with the Attorney General's office, and while I mentioned there's 7 unique professions, each of those professions has its own advisory committee and can receive assistance and legal counsel from the board's attorney for the Attorney General's office. There's also, as I mentioned, there's investigations and discipline. And the attorney who works for the Attorney General's office is a different one who provides assistance in terms of those matters. And occasionally we do have cases that are appealed. So at times we will need to bring in legal counsel. Sometimes we will need funding available in case they need to be expert witnesses on cases, or should they need to go to the Office of Administrative Hearings. So those are some of the primary contractual services. In terms of the additional contractual services, some of these have to do with, in a non-pandemic situation, we would be traveling out to universities and speaking to groups of students about the professions and trying to clarify different things for them to make sure that they don't run into issues in terms of their licensure or in terms of any disciplinary matters. So right now we are doing those remotely, but in a general or normal year, we would go out to those institutions. So that's another contractual services, some of that in-state travel or potentially out-of-state travel to a conference. But most of those have to do with traveling to different groups and speaking on behalf of the agency. Shirley mentioned in terms of our increasing any fees. She's correct in her answer that if you need to increase it above the statutory limit, you would need to pass legislation. But otherwise, the board can take action to go ahead and increase the fees if they vote. However, to change that would be a really modification of our regulations. And to change the regulations, there's a process to go through. And one of the things it would be reviewed by the Division of the Budget and Legislative Research. And we go before the Rules and Regulations Committee. There would be a public hearing. So there is a process to go about doing that. On the other direction and tried to lower fees.
Did you have to get permission to lower the fees from rules and regs?
I believe it is required to adjust the regulations. You need permit. Well, it's not that you need permission. You just need to go through the formal process to have it reviewed and provide.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a couple more items. Just wanted to provide for the committee in case there are questions. Sometimes House appropriations can look at previous year's actual expenditures compared to in the current year's budget. So I have a couple items if you want me to touch on that, some of the reasons over the last few years why our expenditures have increased as a preparation for House appropriations, even though it didn't tie directly into the reasons
Okay, could you hold on? Why don't we take questions with what you've said so far before we go into the next thing? Does anyone have any questions for, and it's Dave, is you like to go by Dave rather than David? Okay. Okay. Any questions for Dave? Representative Wassinger.
I'm interested in that. The renewal fees are so much less than the statutory rate, yet the brand new licensure is right up at the statutory rate. Is there a reason behind that, or
So,
if I may ask? Thank you.
Chair, the initial application is a more extensive process, and there are different documents that are required to be collected, and there's a different level of review. Also, at times, if someone attended a university that's not accredited by the national organization, there's a different process that has to go through, and so sometimes we have to send out a questionnaire, and then board member having to do a comparison and then bring that to the board. So it can be a fairly lengthy process for the initial licensure. For the renewals, we've really tried to make that easier on the current licensees. We actually did launch an online renewal system back in August of last year. So that's one of the reasons why it's less, is that it should move a lot quicker and should give our staff less time to review those applications.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Representative Amix.
Dave, thanks for being here today. Question on the 10% contribution that you all make to, is there any benefit or benefits that the agency receives for that? Legal help, do you get, anything like that?
Chair, the statute that does call for that 10%, it does include language that says the agency is entitled to certain benefits from that. Some legal assistance, some administrative assistance. Over the last few years, a lot of those have been those agencies providing those services, if they believe that they go beyond what would be sort of a small level, have started to charge for those services individually. For example, we do have a contract with administration for certain administrative services. But those are basic services or small services. I believe they still would fall under that 10%. Which still does refer to things like legal services and administrative services. But some of those to our normal expenditures.
Thank you, Madam.
Along those lines, when you said that there was a limit of $100,000 and you all paid 80,000, is that limit of 100 every agency, or that limit that was for you, only yours, and other agencies would have a different upper limit?
Chair, that limit is for all agencies.
Okay.
And in the past, it was a different ratio. This is about maybe 10 years ago or so. It was about 20% or up to $200,000. But that was changed to lower it to 10% and 100,000.
Thank you. Representative Riley.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I have several questions, and so if there's someone else, a senior person in here that has some more questions, mine are rookie questions kind of thing. I'll pass to someone if someone else has the questions.
We are all important in this committee, so.
I would realize that some of the more,
Why
not
don't you
age-wise, but
Why don't you go with 2 questions, and then if we can, we'll come back to you if we have time, which I'm thinking we're going to have time, but why don't we start with 2?
okay, thank you. First of all, just drilling, first of all, Dave, you are a wealth of knowledge. I hope that your association appreciates how much you know. You're coming into this organization just with a wealth of knowledge, so appreciate that. So drilling down, it sounds to me like you have turned your computer resource information of everything over to the state as far as, so they're taking care of all your databases. Is that correct?
They are providing assistance in terms of our, more or less, the software, with the exception of, we did recently get a new licensing database, and that was through an agreement with the Board of Healing Arts. That is a separate cost, but in terms of our general services, those are through information technology services.
Okay. Is that the K-Trax? Is that what that common board? That's something else? Okay. So, all right, so knowing that, then, and you're stepping into this position, it's coming in fresh. So you realize that there are a certain amount of wear and tear, and so your computers are going to last 4 years, your printers are going to last 7 years, that kind of thing. So it sounds like in the past, you haven't had a real cycle of how to replace that out of capital improvements and it sounds like you're starting to do that. Is that correct?
That's what I plan to do. In the past few years, there has been some money budgeted to do that as needed. But it seems to me, based on my review, that at the end of the year, the agency looked at, are these devices still working? And they stretched them. Some of the computers, I believe, are about 6 years old. Some of the furniture is a little bit is more mild, but it does come to the point to where it does need to be replaced. We've been alternating staff in and out of the office to make sure that they're safe and avoid exposure. But it does reach a certain point to where these things do need to be replaced.
So that kind of finishes my question of, so you're thinking about having some kind of a schedule that can be worked into that capital budget so that you can replace, I wouldn't say you're replacing your desks often, but definitely your computers, your printers, the major things in your office. Thank you.
Representative Rajas.
Two? Jeez, okay. Representative Raleigh, that's fine. Just ask as many questions as you want. Dave, I wondered, I saw you here and I went, okay, well, that's interesting. My question, I think I probably asked this before. And you've only been there, not even quite a month yet. I'd be curious, maybe next year when you come before us, do you have enough people? Because I see, of the 9 people, you have 7 that are working on, I don't know why I have the hottest mic, I have the loudest voice. But you have 7 people working on the licensees and we got 13,000 people with licenses and you got 2.4 people investigating. I don't mean to be an alarmist, but I have a little concern that what are we missing? And I guess I say that in light of everything else that's going on in the world around us. We're worried about collecting fees at $200 or $50 at a time and, not to look for trouble, but you understand where I'm coming? Because I think, like many of us, we want to give you the tools you need. And we know those of us that have been here for a couple of years realize that, that your agency or sub-agency or whatever is one that, if the computer does turn on, oh, we can maybe wait till next year. And then all of a sudden, it's like me, instead of, I wait till my tires are bald and I slide off the road before I spend the money to buy 4 of them rather than do them as I should on a timely basis. So that's a long question to probably a short answer.
Chair, I'm not sure that it's a short answer. I think one of the complications is the pandemic right now. One thing that has been a little unusual in my brief time with the agency is that we really have tried to make an effort to have as many people working from home the majority of the time. So I really haven't had a chance to see everybody at their workstations processing things as fast as they can under normal circumstances. They're doing a wonderful job. The staff is great, but it is difficult to go back and forth between being in the office, being at home. So it is possible in the future we might need additional employees, but right now, maybe too early for me to gauge that.
So are you physically in the office every day then?
I have been in the office most days. Around the time of the federal inauguration, they closed down the Eisenhower building for a few days. But other than that, I have been able to be in the office. I do have a laptop, so I can work remotely.
So to piggyback off of that, your 9 FTs, are they all filled right now?
Yes, that's correct. They're all.
And they generally have been, that you know of, in the last year or so? That's common for you to have all of those filled?
Yes, we did have, over the past 2 or 3 years, I believe one employee was let go, one did pass away, and we had one retirement. But in general, the entire staff is full.
Okay, a couple other questions. Just for my own knowledge, I thought I heard you say 70 professions, but maybe you said 7 because I'm counting 7, but it was 7, not 70, right?
I misspoke. It was 7 unique professions.
Okay. Okay, and then did you all get any of the federal CARES money or anything? Did you, any of that come into your agency?
So we did receive the $860 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. At the time of the pandemic, we did obtain some 6 tablet 2-in-1 devices. I am currently working with the Office of Information Technology Services and other entities to see if those are correctly attributed to our fee fund or to additional CARES Money Act.
Okay, are there any other questions for now? Dave's going to continue, but anything else for right now? Okay, if you'll go ahead with your presentation.
Madam Chair, and there's just a couple items I just wanted to touch upon, just because they are things that sometimes people ask about, and I thought it would be helpful for the committee to know. If you look at our revenue from year to year, you do see a fluctuation every other year, and there's a reason for that. Basically, most of our professions, there's a 2-year license, and you will get licensed again after those 2 years from when you were licensed. However, licensed psychologists do come up every even numbered year. So all of the licensed psychologists, they will be in that even number fiscal year. Additionally, when the addiction counselors were brought in almost 10 years ago, those were individuals who were registered under the national organization, and when they became licensed by the state, a number of them came in all at once. And so when they come up for their 2-year renewal, it's a bigger block than if you had it spread around. So I just wanted to touch on that. And then I also wanted to let you know, so I did mention that we do have some funding for our legal contract with the Attorney General's office. There is some additional funding in there for legal services as needed. And the agency will make every effort to only spend money as it's appropriate to be spent. But I think sometimes when individuals look at our previous actuals compared to our new level of expenditures, it looks like a steep increase. But really what has happened in the past is the agency has made efforts. If they don't need to spend the money, they don't spend it. They need that flexibility in the agency's budget so that if we do need to bring in expert witnesses or there are more hearings, we don't want to have a situation to where the agency wouldn't have the funding to go ahead and fulfill statutory responsibilities. So we may not need to spend that money, and if we don't need to, we won't spend it. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. That money is in there just in case we do need it for those hearings.
Okay, great. Is there anything else?
No, I believe that's all the information I have, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there are additional questions, I'm happy to go back and collect that information.
Okay, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave, would you turn to page 5 for me, please? On your performance measures. And again, I realize that you've just been here for a short time, but what are some of the categories of these alleged violations? Is there like 5 categories? And then another? Can you give me an idea on that?
Yes, so the report of alleged violations, the biggest one is that we do audit number of continuing education hours to make sure that people are staying current with what they're required to do in terms of those continuing education hours. And if they don't provide documentation, then the investigator will go forward to go ahead and assess that along. So that's probably the biggest category. But what most of the other complaints are is that on our website, we have a form and anybody can submit a complaint against a current practitioner. And as long as they are a licensee or someone practicing in Kansas, we do an investigation as long as what's alleged would be a violation of the statutes. And some of these could be violations of the statutes or regulatory language in terms of how someone is treating a particular client. Or it could be someone who is a supervisor who has observed an improper practice they believe by someone that they're overseeing. So it could be any of those things, but they would submit a form and our investigator would do the review of it and then contact them and then it would go forward. But I would say the continuing education would probably be the most popular in terms of the numbers. And then after that, it would probably just be any reports that were received.
Madam Chair, follow up on that. So what are the, can you identify any of those categories? I mean, that's an awful broad thing of just people being upset at their psychologist kind of thing. Can you drill into that a little more?
There's some common ones that have to do with a dual relationship. When you're in a position of trust like that, you're not allowed to properly use your client's money. You're not allowed to have improper relationships with clients, different things like that. But there are some other things in the regulations that do talk about if you are in a position of trust and you are unnecessarily cruel to an individual, that there is grounds for that too, for someone to allege a complaint based on the licensing body.
So a follow-up to that, then drilling down into that. So it's, do you provide ethics or classes or whatever of expectations to your field of membership?
So, Madam Chair, we don't provide those with our office. There are other entities that provide those continuing education hours. And certain types of licenses, there are supervisors who meet regularly with those individuals. And in those cases, they provide a report to the board. And they would check a box if they have any concerns about this person being licensed, and then they can provide documentation. But in terms of us providing those services, that's outside of.
So what you're saying is that you have expectations for these different categories, and there could be ramifications and penalties and fees or fines for these different categories. But at this point, you're not educating those people, or I can understand that they wouldn't know that they had a certain amount of hours and they should follow up. I don't understand through an ethics that they wouldn't know that they're not supposed to have a dual relationship. You know, that it's unethical to be using your client's money wrong, all these kind of things, which brings me, the actual point is your number of people or the number of cases that you are looking at doesn't go down. It remains the same. It seems like if you are training these people, noticing these people, explaining to these people what the challenges are that you're running into, this number would go down 5% each year, down, 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 because they understand that they need to be doing this stuff. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Representative Rajes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't, I think, and I appreciate Representative Riley. A couple years ago, it's been 4 years ago, when did we start the performance measures on the budget? 3 years ago? Anyway. And so I think what, and I think I'm not sure exactly where you're going, and that's fine. But I had the same concern, I think, the first year it came out on budgets like this, where you have to come up, you have to come up with at least 3 of these kind of performance measures. And so and so sometimes it's like, well, yes, you assume that your number of alleged violations received should go down, but, you know, in order to kind of fill the silo, if you will, you have to come up with these numbers. And so I think before we go, well, gosh, if there's 180, 200, you know, to me, I think it's pie in the sky numbers. It's like, okay, let's fill this in. So you have, when you take a step back and look at the bigger picture of the performance measures, you know, it may go to bigger budgets or other things, but everybody has to have some sort of performance measure. So, you know, not to, but I guess my concern is thus, you know, the budget committee going into policy decisions, sometimes that's a bit difficult, but I understand where you're going, but just maybe for another explanation, Madam Chair, sorry to take that, but to kind of explain that, because it's the same thing of percent of renewal applications processed after 30 days. Yes, I'm sure the Dave staff knows that they need to be done in a timely manner, but if they're meeting that, then, you know, there again, there's a measure that they can put on it. So those are, I think, when we look at these performance measures in our smaller budgets, we're going to find kind of the same thing of, you know, it's different than doing a deep dive as far as, you know, how many school days or how many, whatever that is, that sometimes these other things we look at. So
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I don't think you're saying the performance measures are not important.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. No. And when I said Pinus, I don't necessarily mean that. I mean, there's a method to it. I get that. But as far as how you're judged on your performance is not based on the budget performance measures that are put into place. Correct? Or am I speaking out of turn? And I don't, if you don't, I don't put you in a spot, but from an appropriator standpoint, that's the way I see it. And those that have been on the committee in the past, am I right? Or at least somewhat right?
If I could just interject real quick. I mean, you do have two programs. They're licensing and the investigation. So you report on both of those programs, and I appreciate that. And so it's not that they're not important, but the actual numbers and the policies really, we don't dig into necessarily, but it would be a good thing to talk about if you would like to visit more about it. But Dave, go ahead and respond to that or whatever you'd like to say.
Sure, and I just wanted to clarify too, on this performance measure, it is reports of alleged violations. And the reason why it's kind of a distinction there is because this is sort of a measure to help us keep track of how many of these cases our investigators are looking into. And so we hope that in doing the investigation, we find that perhaps someone was unhappy with something that was done, but it may not have been a violation. But we wanted to sort of gauge the time and how many of these cases our investigators really are working on. So just wanted to clarify that. That's sort of one of the issues.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, last question. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I appreciate the representative's feedback to that. I mean, from a rookie point of view, as far as learning the budget, you know, if from a business person standpoint, if you have a goal, you should set a goal of lowering that specific thing. And you can't control how many people out of 3 million people are going to complain, right? And so I can understand a leveling out, but if that's going to be your goal, then maybe you should pick a different goal, that kind of thing. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions? Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, anything else? Okay, Dave, do you have anything that you'd like to finish up with? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Okay, committee, now we will be hearing about the Board of Healing Arts. And we will start with Shirley, and she's going to sit there because that seems to be the best way that the microphone works.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. You have in front of you the budget analysis for the State Board of Healing Arts. I will let you know that Tucker Poling, the executive director, is also here, and he will provide testimony after I've gone through the budget analysis. Now that you've seen a budget analysis, the front page is just a summary of expenditures. So on page 2, the agency overview, the State Board of Healing Arts was created in 1957, and it licenses and regulates medical, osteopathic, and chiropractic doctors. There are other permits and licenses involved with the agency as well. If you could skip to page 10, I will start with the current year budget for the agency. The agency requests a revised estimate of $6.5 million, all from special revenue funds. This also is a fee-funded agency that collects fees as the revenue source for the agency. This is no change from the 2021 approved amount, and there are 62 FTE, which is the same as the approved number. There is a breakdown of the expenditure categories. You will notice, although the budget is the same as the approved last year, there have been some changes in increases and decreases among the categories. There was a slight increase in salary and wages. Again, there was an increase in health insurance and unemployment compensation. There's a slight decrease in contractual services. There was a reduction to the Kansas Medical Society's Impaired Provider Program, which is under Contractual Services. Slight increase in commodities and a slight increase in capital outlay. On page 11, you will see that the governor recommended 6.5 million, all from special revenue funds. This is a increase of $21,742. This is due to the fact they received some federal coronavirus relief money for laptop computers and equipment so that the agency's employees could work from home. Would you like me to continue to 22, Madam Chair?
Let me ask if, does anyone have any questions on 2021? Okay, please continue.
On page 12, we have the fiscal year 2022 budget year. The agency requests 6.5 million. Again, this is special revenue funds. This is an increase of $58,000, primarily salary and wages and capital outlay. Again, the salary and wages are primarily for the health insurance. Contractual service, there was a decrease in $8,000. Commodities went up $2,800 for office supplies. And then capital outlay, there was an increase of $20,000 for software and computer equipment. The governor concurs with the agency's budget. The Board of Healing Arts in the past has contributed some of their fee-funded money to the Board of Pharmacy to help fund K-TRAC's program. There was meetings over the interim to try and find a way to fund K-TRACs within their federal funds and within other resources so that they would not have to ask the Board of Healing Arts, the Board of Nursing, the Board of Dental, and there was another, I can't remember, there were 4 fees or fee funds that paid about $300,000 to $400,000 last year. So this year, the Board of Healing Arts was asked to transfer $75,000 of their fee funds to the Board of Pharmacy to help fund K-TRACs, and then the other fee board that was asked to help pay for K-TRACs was nursing at $70,000. So although it's less than last year, they're still helping fund the K-TRAC system. And I believe Mr. Poling will go into that with part of his testimony.
Just for those on the committee that may not know, can you just give a quick explanation of K-TRACs?
K-TRACs is the state's prescription monitoring program where they keep track of the distribution of opioids and other abuse substances so that they can find persons that are shopping around for different doctors for opioids and other abuse prescriptions. So most of it is funded through a federal program, but they have not found a substantial source that they don't have to ask the fee boards to help fund that.
Thank you.
Any questions on 22?
Yes, not?
So on page 14, fiscal year 2023, the agency requests 6.9 million. This is an increase of 373,000 or 5.7%. Again, there's an increase in capital outlay. If you look at each expenditure category, there is a slight increase of 23,000 for salaries and wages. Again, health insurance went up. Contractual services is an increase of 32,000, and that is for communication equipment and computer programming. Commodities increased $2,000, excuse me, for gasoline and office supplies, and then capital outlay increased $315,000 for processing, computer processing equipment and software. Again, the governor concurs with the agency's budget and recommends the transfer of $75,000 to the Board of Pharmacy to help fund K-Trax.
Okay, Representative Riley, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think at this point, when I saw this about the gasoline, so this agency and other agencies have access to state vehicles, and so they check out a state vehicle and they pay for the gases on that vehicle. So there's no ownership of that vehicle. Is that correct?
They could own their own vehicles or they could check out state vehicles, depending on how many vehicles they need.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, Shirley.
On page 17 at the bottom, you have a description of the Healing Arts Fee Fund. On the next page is the table of that fee fund. You will see on the transfers out for the governor's recommendation for 2022 and 2023, there's the transfer of the $75,000 for each of those 2 years. The other thing I will note, since there is transfers going out of the fee fund, you might want to look at the ending balance as a percent of expenditures. So the actuals in 2020, it was 54.9%, and with the GovRec in 2023, it decreases down to 46.4. So although it still appears to be a healthy ending balance, you can see that there is a decrease over the years. The next page on 19 shows their different fees, what the current fee is and what the statutory limit is. This agency does not have programs other than administration. And then you'll notice on the last page, on page 21, you have the 62 FTE, which has stayed the same for the last few years. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Shirley. Anyone have a question? Okay. Oh, yes, Representative Fairchild.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this or not, but do you have to increase any of your fees to get the 5.7% increase from 2022 to 2023?
I do not have any records with me on increased fees, but I can check on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all right. Shirley, was there anything else that you would like to,
No, ma'am.
any other wisdom you'd like to give us?
No.
Okay. Okay, so Tucker, if you would come up and join us, that would be great. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. Okay. Yeah, I'm just keeping my mask on because Shirley is here. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Tucker Poling. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas State Board of Healing Arts. Licenses and regulates over 32,000 healthcare professionals in Kansas from 15 different healthcare professions. Ms. Morrow referenced a few of the major ones, but we license and regulate a pretty broad array of healthcare providers. What I usually like to tell people is it's easier to think of who we don't license and regulate in the healthcare sector. And the major ones are nursing, dentists, and non-psychiatrist mental health care providers. Licenses and regulates therapists who are not psychiatrists. So that's a little bit about who we are. My board is made up of 15 members, 12 of whom are licensed healthcare providers here in Kansas from several different healthcare professions. We are a fee-funded agency, fully fee-funded. In addition to that, we are a net contributor to the state general fund. So in addition to that $100,000 that we, by statute, just transfer from our fee funds into the general fund, we also contribute some additional amounts that go, as I understand, to maintain buildings like this and some other things. Our accountant's best estimate is the total net contribution to the general fund would be more than so. I think Ms. Morrow did an excellent job of summarizing our budget, where we're at. I'll tell you, I am relatively new in my position. I was just confirmed by the Senate last week, but I've been in the interim position for about a year. You have my written testimony, so I won't go into the details of that, but it was raised earlier. The one difference between what we submitted and what the governor is recommending for fiscal year 22 and 23 is that KTRAX transfer. KTRAX is a really important program. Florida Pharmacy is doing a great job with administering that. It's a very important program. We do think it's important to find a permanent funding source for that. This was, the federal funding ran out in 2016. Initially, this fee funds transfer regime was intended to be a short-term budget bridge to 2018. And so here we are, and we're still kind of in that position. And so, this should, I want to be clear, we absolutely value KTRAX. We think it's really important. And, we want to be a team player in that regard. But we also think it's important to comply with not just the letter, but the spirit and intent of the underlying statute, 1684, which generally says that we're not supposed to be charging healthcare providers, the prescribers, a fee for this program. And so we're not doing that. We're not doing that technically, but all of our money comes from the licensees, the healthcare providers who pay their license fee every year. And so some of that money is getting transferred out to fund this program. So I'm here for any questions.
I do have a quick question. I don't have a paper copy. So you sent testimony and we got it an email. Is that correct? Okay. And we didn't print it. Okay. Side note, would the what? Sent it yesterday. Just a question of the committee. Would you like to have those testimonies, just as we had this one from Dave? Would you like those printed and on your desk, or are you all good with paperless as far as that goes? Committee, what's your pleasure? Sign it. Paperless is fine. Okay.
Paperless is fine. One thing we've learned in my committee is to send them out just a couple hours ahead. We've learned this process because many of us get literally hundreds of emails, and if I don't know how to spell your last name, I may not find it. So, but I think it's fine.
Okay, so I think that will mean, we'll try for paperless, but I think that'll mean you all need to bring your computers. And I can tell you specifically, John sent this to you at 12:23 today. I find that's helpful if I know the time. So, okay, side note, sorry, Tucker, to do that, but I wanted to make sure I knew about that. Okay, do we have questions for Tucker on the Board of Healing Arts? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I drill into that KTRAX a little more? That was interesting to me. So how many dentists, or I should first say, dentists do write scripts? that go through that K-Trax. Nurses write scripts that go through that. And what was the other? So there are just three sources, and then doctors and psychiatrists all write. So it seems like if you are uncomfortable with taking money out of the fee funding, it seems like the same kind of thing as what we do to farmers and different thing, that maybe this percentage should be held against the certain amount of scripts that go in, that, you know, there would be a fee of 3 cents or whatever that amount of money would be per each script that goes into K-Track that would pay for K-Track. That's kind of what farmers do with fertilizer funds and stuff like they do. Has anybody thought of doing that thing? Thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
So I think the answer to, has anyone thought of, I would have brought paper copies, I did provide in my written testimony. Oh, you've got it. Great. So one of the things I attached is a letter from March 11, 2019, where stakeholders had, gotten together and come up with ideas, and had looked at some of these different things. And there wasn't a resolution at that time. I think there was also another meeting this past summer. Some testifying on this on Friday. Yeah, so I believe the Board of Pharmacy is going to be testifying on this on Friday in ethics and transparency. But there was some more meetings. There were some more meetings this summer at which some additional concepts were raised, and I think ultimately it's going to be, for the legislature to determine what the permanent solution is.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any other questions for Tucker? Representative Wassinger.
I actually don't have a question. I have a comment. I'm grateful that you're spending money on updating your computer equipment based on the fact that the state of Kansas is experiencing a great deal of problems with the computer. So I just wanted to give you a little kudos on that. So thank you.
Thank you. And that does account, I think, fiscal year 23, you'll see a significant jump. And that's one of the reasons is we realized that we needed to lack of a better term.
Very good. Representative Rajas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate, and I finally just found the testimony so I could understand exactly what you were saying. And I agree, and I think your predecessor, if I remember right, was very upset last year when I think it hit the press when she was driving or something about paying for K-Trax, and that you all were going to take a much bigger hit than what you have. And I can appreciate, but, as somebody that's been involved in state government, a short-term funding gap could mean a year, it could mean 20 years. I know you can't see, and I should show my face, but I think we all are working on it, and I think last year we were close. The COVID situation, the omnibus, it was talked about, and I would guess it'll be talked about again in appropriations. Understand not wanting to take from you, but also realizing the importance of this program, and we do have support, but I guess continue to be with us and work with us as we find that solution. And, as we all know what the hit the budget's taken, it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's one thing that, and if you don't understand what the K-Trax program, it is tremendous. I mean, it really cuts down on doctor shopping and these things. And so it's a very vital program. And so, but I do agree, and I hope we do get to that point. And if it can be this year, if pharmacy has a solution, that'd be great. I think what Representative Riley, those type of things, and in getting some sort of a, but then again, we want to make sure that people are not, not writing the scripts simply because of a 2 or 3 cents or 5 cents, But to discourage those, but that goes back to the whole chicken and egg thing of investigations and, you know, and making sure everybody, you know, I mean, not everybody is quite as, you know, up to board as what we assume they are. So anyway, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
May I respond briefly?
Yes. Mhm.
So I want to just be absolutely clear. I agree with everything that you just said, and I want to be clear that the Board of Pharmacy is doing a great job with this program. They're running it. The reason why, you know, we're even able to make it feasible is in large part because the Board of Pharmacy is doing a good job at finding efficiencies, you know, cutting that number down to as low as it can be. I want to make clear that that is not a criticism of the program or how it's being run. It's just, and you know, you referenced being in state government. I'm still relatively new. You know, most of my experience has been in the private sector, so a lot of this is, you know, I'm learning that, you know, a budget bridge of a year, you know, count your, you know, chickens when they hatch. But it's just we want to keep this on the radar screen. I don't want to be seen as sort of just whining, but we do think it's important because it is our licensees' money, and hope that there's a solution.
Okay, great. Any other questions? I do have a couple. One is the 100,000, the 10%, or the cap of 100,000 that you contribute to the SGF. These numbers don't reflect that, right? These numbers are after that's been transferred. I believe that's what we said for the other agency. Is that true?
I will defer to Ms. Morrow on, well, okay, maybe I won't.
And the other roughly 100,000 too that you mentioned, because I want to ask about that. You said that you felt like the net was about 200.
Right. And I'm sorry, I don't have more precise numbers for you, but that's something I can definitely get you. I have our accountants come up with that. But she has explained it to me, and the way I understand it is, in addition to that 100,000, we contribute to the building fund and some other similar funds, and that kind of comes out to be more than.
And is that a statutory contribution to that? I mean, how did they come up with that they need to contribute to the building fund? Shirley, thank you.
I had provided you the cost indices, and if they're in a state building, they would pay whatever the fees are that are in the cost indices. They may also pay for some state support for the buildings. I don't know what their lease contract is, but we can look that up. I did want to comment on the 100,000 that they're charged for D of A services. I believe that covers paychecks, email. Within that statute, there is a list of things that Department of Administration supplies. And then in addition to that, what Mr. Poling was talking about is they also charge for some additional services that they pay for. And so what he's saying is, in addition to the 100,000, there are other services that Department of Administration or the state charge them for. But we can get you a list of all those services.
Okay, and if I understand, if these numbers are before or after that.
I'll have to find
Okay,
that out.
that's fine. Okay, and then your 62 FTE positions, are those all filled now?
No, we have two open positions right now. I've got two attorney positions that I'm trying to hire right now.
And of those 62, could you just give us a very rough breakdown of attorneys or administrative personnel, or, you know, just kind of who are those 62?
So licensing department, I believe 7 to 10 employees in that department. Investigations, again, these are ballpark, but investigations, I would estimate in the neighborhood of more 12 to 15 employees in that department. Litigation is another department. That's because we're constantly going through both administrative litigation and civil litigation. Because when we discipline someone, especially people that we license and regulate are often people who do litigate things. They often have the resources to do that. So we have a lot of litigation both on the administrative side in the district court and then in the Court of Appeals. We've always got cases going on. So litigation, I would say probably 7 employees in that ballpark. Administrative, I would say 7 to 10. And then we have IT staff of, I believe, 5. We do, as part of our IT program, we do perform services for other small agencies at cost. So it's basically a service to other agencies, and we just charge them cost through essentially. I know I'm missing things, and I can get you a more specific breakdown.
Okay, I would be interested in
General,
that, if you don't
I
mind.
miss general counsel department. We don't use, there was a discussion of using AG services.
Mhm.
AG doesn't provide our legal services. We have our own legal services. We have a general counsel. And general counsel handles not only being the attorney for the agency, but also the litigation outside of the agency. So not administrative litigation.
Okay, that's great. So I'm sorry, but that did bring up another question that when, by program, pretty much it just says administration. But it sounds like you have your own investigative program. I'm just trying to learn the difference between what we just heard, how the BSRB has, 2 parts, but and this could be a question for Shirley, but, administration was your program. So just trying to learn how they have 2 programs and you have 1 program, but you both have investigation.
And I think that's in part based on just how you describe what you do. I know in previous budgets we did have things broken up into different programs, and I think this year we tried to consolidate and streamline, the budget document that we submitted. And so I think that was part of that process. Categorize everything we do as we're one team, and we all have different hats that we wear. But when we were looking at our prior budgets, we found that we could be more straightforward
So just to make sure I understand, you feel like this is more straightforward, we're doing it this way?
That's what we felt. That's what we did this year. I'm certainly happy. I'm open to input, ways to do it more effectively next year.
Okay. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Pulling? I want to apologize that this was our first day. And so if I had known that you sent John and I should have asked. And so I apologize that I didn't have everyone bring their computers and able to pull up, or that we didn't print your. So we're learning, this is the first day. So you all are, for me, the guinea pig. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Then I think we are finished with our budget hearing. Shirley, is there anything else that we need to mention to people?
Just that we have planned recommendations for these 2 budgets on Thursday, along with historical and state library, which you will hear tomorrow. So just be thinking about what you want to do.
Okay, good, perfect. I will mention to you all that we do have session tomorrow. We have 8 bills above the line. We have been assured that we will be finished by 1:25, so we can get to our committee meeting. So we will be having a committee meeting. I probably won't get up and make an announcement saying we are having our committee meeting. We're having it, just so you all know. Okay, any questions, anything for the good of the committee? Anybody? Okay, then we're adjourned. Thank you so much.